I'm Jonathan Fung from the Department of Physics and Astronomy, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the organizing committee to What Matters to Me and Why at UC Irvine. What Matters to Me and Why is sponsored by the Office of the Chancellor and also the Campus Climate Council. It was created as a place to basically allow faculty and staff to share what matters to them and why. This includes things like values, beliefs, motivations, personal journeys, where they've been, where they're going, what they love, what they fear. All sorts of interesting things have come out. And through this, it's been a fascinating adventure. We've also been able to appreciate the amazing diversity that we have here at UC Irvine, and also the commonalities that bring us together, brought us together, and continue to bring us together. We are now starting our 5th season. Many of you have attended a number of these talks. If you haven't, you can look on our website. They've all been videotaped. Every speaker has been given the option of being videoed or not. Every single one has said yes so far. It's kind of amazing. One of them said, "Look, everybody I know on campus will be in the room anyway, so what do I care if you post it on YouTube?" So maybe that's the reasoning. But I'd encourage you to go look. We have 28 absolutely fascinating videos at this point. It makes for a wonderful few evenings of binge viewing. Let me also note that last year we actually started some spin-offs given the interest in this series. As I said, faculty and staff are the speakers of this series, but there are, of course, many other interesting constituencies here at UCI. In particular, we have an alumni series, which started last year with 3 great events. So alumni come back and talk to students, but as well as faculty and staff, about what influenced them at UCI and where they are now. That has been really interesting. We have that series continuing this year. We had the first event actually just last night, but 3 more are coming, so roughly 1 per quarter. So keep your eyes and emails ready for that. And in addition, of course, there's a huge other constituency here, which is students. And so we have a student series, which is started just with a pilot talk last year, which went very well, and that's continuing. So there'll be 2 talks in that series this coming year. So I encourage you to really look out for those. All of them have been very interesting so far. The organizing committee is made up of faculty, staff, and students, a very sort of diverse organizing committee as well. Because our wonderful students have this really irritating habit of graduating, we actually have some openings for students on the organizing committee this year. So if you are a student, either a graduate student or undergraduate student, and maybe have attended several of these talks and would like to help us organize any of these 3 series, but in addition also even the coming next year speaker list, we'd love to have your input. And so please come and see me afterwards, or email me or anybody on the organizing committee to just get involved. Some housekeeping announcements. First, please bring your lunch box out of the room with you when you leave. This is a nice space. We really like it. It's fairly intimate and nice, and we'd like to keep it. So please do bring your lunch out with you. The talk, as I mentioned, all these talks are being filmed. So I think kind of by stepping through that door, you've agreed to appear on video camera. If you really didn't want to, the cameras are pointing this way, so you can sort of move to the back. Okay? And third, I believe you are all given questionnaires when you came in, right? So those are for you to provide input on what you like and what you don't like in the series, and also to suggest future speakers. We tabulate all those. We review them as a committee every single time. So please do fill that out during or after the talk and hand it in on your way out. The next talk is November 9th, again, a Wednesday at noon. Anna Barragan will be talking. She's the UCI Dreamers Coordinator, who provides support services for the undocumented student population. I believe that will be a great talk. And so keep your eyes peeled for that. And last, in a moment, I'll invite Doug Haynes to come up and introduce our wonderful speaker today. But first, please take a minute to say hello to your neighbor.
Good afternoon. I'm quite delighted to be here. I'm Doug Haynes, as Jonathan mentioned. I'm the co-chair of the organizing committee, as well as a member of the Department of History faculty. And I want to join Jonathan in adding my welcome to those of you who are coming back now in our 5th season, as well as to extend a warm greeting to those who are visiting and participating for the first time. I cannot think of a better way to kick off our 5th season than to introduce our first speaker, Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor Enrique Lavernia. Now in his 2nd year as the Chief Academic Officer of UCI, Provost Lavernia is a distinguished professor of chemical engineering and materials science. He joined us from UC Davis, where he was Dean of the School of Engineering for more than a decade. However, his connection to UCI goes back much further. In fact, it's fair to say, even though he is a graduate, a double graduate of MIT, he bleeds blue and gold. He launched his career at UCI in 1987, also known as the 20th century, as an assistant professor, rising rapidly through the ranks to become Chancellor's Professor and later Department Chair of Chemical Engineering and Material Science. He also has joined the very rare group of engineering researchers to be elected into the National Academy of Engineering. Now as Provost and throughout his career, Enrique has been a relentless advocate for inclusive excellence. His efforts have been recognized by several national organizations, including the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science, the Hispanic Engineering National Achievement Organization, just to name a few. Since returning to UCI, the campus has been designated by the U.S. Office of Post-Secondary Education as an Asian American, Native American, and Pacific Islander serving institution this past February. UCI is the only member campus in the prestigious American Association of Universities to enjoy this designation. But there is more. The campus is now poised to become a recognized Hispanic-serving institution in 2017. UCI will join UC Santa Barbara as the only HSI campuses in the AAU, and UCI's designation will also increase the total number of UC campuses to 5 with this designation. Please join me in welcoming Provost Lavernia.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. First of all, thank you. I can't believe you've given up your lunch hour to come listen to me. When I was asked to do this, like many things I get asked in this job, I said, sure, I'll do it. And then I went to the website and started listening to the prior talks. And I had 3 reactions. 1, what did I agree to do? 2, they're going to be disappointed because there's some fantastic speakers that I've heard. And the 3rd one is, if they expect me to sit still for 40 minutes, it's not going to happen because I can't do that. Seriously, thank you. I have to start with an anecdote. When I became dean at Davis, we had an alumni event where families would be invited back to campus. And a group of colleagues came up with an idea of sort of meet the dean tent. And I was leaving the building, and it was a Saturday, Sunday activity, and my kids, who are now in their 20s, were probably 10 and 9 at the time, said, where are you going, Papa? And I said, well, I'm going to this tent. They said, to do what? It says the Meet the Dean tent. And they started laughing, and they said, now, who would want to meet you? Humbling lesson from my children. So I guess, where do I start? I learned from a number of these videos that I start at the beginning. And so maybe I'll go there. I was born in Cuba, 1960. If you recall, Fidel Castro came to power in 1959. So I was a bit of a child of the revolution. My parents were not political. Initially, they stayed behind, hoping things would get better. When things were not getting better, they quickly realized we had to get out. This was at a time when folks were given permission to leave the country. You were going on vacation, except that you couldn't take anything out with you. And we ended up flying to Mexico City because there were no direct flights into the US. So we lived in Mexico City, for which I'm always profoundly grateful, for short of a year, while paperwork and relatives and whatnot got us invited into the US. But if you go to my office today, there's a little framed document that's kind of not readily visible. And it's a reminder to me, and that document is a list of what my parents were allowed to pack. And you read it today and you want to laugh because it's, 2 pairs of underwear, a pair of socks, a pair of shoes. And that's what my parents started a new life with. And I sometimes think about this. I have 2 kids. If somebody were to say, having them be 5 and 10, okay, you're moving to Siberia to start all over again, I don't know that I could do it. So I share this with you because it's a profound power in my life that's always helped me get through difficult challenges. When I think I have it tough, I don't know what tough is. They knew what tough was. We landed in Puerto Rico, so I grew up in Puerto Rico between 1965 and 1978. I did my high school in Puerto Rico. Can't think of a warmer, nicer nation than Puerto Rico was to about 1 million Cuban immigrants who landed there. I always felt bad for them because in many ways the Puerto Ricans are friendly, they're welcoming, and the Cubans can sometimes not be that way. Puerto Rico was a great experience for me, partly because Puerto Rican society, and Puerto Rico has a number of huge financial problems today, as we've all seen, but Puerto Rican society was always really well integrated. And if you look at the Puerto Rican people, there's no real race distinctions on the island. So it was a great place to grow up for me because you had friends from just all over, not just the racial, but also the economic strata. And that helped me feel very comfortable with very diverse groups. I did a private high school because public education in Puerto Rico is actually awful. I went to a Jesuit high school, and the Jesuits tend to pound in you academics, whether you want it or not, but also quite a bit of social justice. Growing up, we had to go once a week to teach math and English to very poor parts of the island. And trust me, a lot of parents did not like that. You got this nice, protected child. You're going to put him on a bus to what neighborhood? I don't think so. Well, the Jesuit stand was, if you don't like it, take him somewhere else. And the attendance was really driven by academics. That's what drove this school. Growing up, the academics were always important, partly because I guess my experience as an immigrant was that, everything you have they can take away from you. They cannot take away your education. And so that's been a constant force in my life, not surprising what I ended up doing. My late mother was a biology professor, very disappointed that I decided to study dead things instead of live things. And my father was an engineer who was very disappointed that I stayed in academia because I didn't want to work for a living. Can't win. But it's the truth. They're both gone now. So decided that the weather, the people, everything was great in Puerto Rico, so I decided to go to school on the East Coast. My family had traveled, but I had never seen snow. Was I in for a surprise? Because snow not only affects what you do part of the day, it affects what you do the entire day, right? I remember slipping, I remember falling in the ice. I went to school at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, which has about the lousiest weather you can think of because of the way it's positioned on the coast. You don't get snow, you get freezing rain. And those of you who know what freezing rain is, it's much worse than snow. Brown was a good experience for me. I went there because my parents did not allow me to visit, right? Most kids now go visit schools. My parents was, nah, you get in, you go. You don't need to see the place. You're going there to study. Imagine me trying to tell that to my kids today. You're nuts. And so I ended up at Brown. Fortunately, it was a good experience, and had a great 4 years. Didn't have to study very hard, quite frankly. I did a lot of partying the first 2 years. I had a very good high school training, so I got away with a lot of things that maybe I shouldn't have gotten away with, but I did. But I also did develop a relationship with research and academics. I had a prof who sort of offered me an opportunity to go into a lab. And the fact is that I went in because it gave me a place to study, not necessarily that I was interested in the research, but guess what happened? I got interested in the research. And so continued my career as an undergraduate. Believe me, I wasn't an A student. I was okay. I worked hard. But I was focused on many, many things. One of the things that I did as an undergraduate was I continued to study French. I started French in high school in Puerto Rico. That was a common thing to do, to have a third language in high school. And I had a professor who asked me, how come every class that I teach, you show up? You're an engineering student. What are you doing here? And I looked at him and I says, now, would you like to hang out with engineering students or with French students? What do you think? I said, okay, I get it. Started a graduate program at Brown. And was moving happily along when I had a professor say to me, why don't you apply to MIT? He was from MIT, which I did. And I've got to tell you, in all honesty, the day I got into the only school I applied to, because I had started a program already, was one of tremendous pressure, because I thought I had decided what I wanted to do, and all of a sudden this option comes into play. And funny enough, it was my girlfriend at the time who thought I should go to MIT because it'd be safer, right? I mean, there's no female students at the time at MIT. Well, guess what? I met the love of my life, my current wife, at MIT. It's 30 years last week that we've been married. Yeah. And she's one of your faculty, by the way. She has a different last name, so that people don't puncture her tires when you get mad at me. So, graduate school was both a lot of work and a lot of fun. Developed a passion for academia. Yes, I like the research, but I also really liked what I saw was my advisor's lifestyle, which was what? He had young people all the time around him. He got to travel all over the world. He got to learn stuff while being paid to learn stuff. And so I started thinking about academics. Didn't really think I was good enough, but that became something that I decided I wanted to do, partly motivated by what I saw was a really enriching way to spend a lifetime. Nick became a very important force in my life, not just because of the academics. He was a great human being. In fact, another thing that's in my office is a picture of him. He's gone now. And I learned a lot of things from him. One of my favorite ones are some of the phrases he'd come up with. Once you get to be a little older in graduate school, you think you're smart and you can argue with your advisor, right? All that, have that happen to us. And Nick would look at me and say, Enrique, I have forgotten more than you have ever learned. Which I'm sure was true. So he really helped shape the way I saw graduate school, not just from the academic side, big group from people, with people from all over the world. Lots of languages spoken in the lab. But he always opened his house to his graduate students, which is something that I've always done, right? Our graduate students, our undergraduates get to come to our house once or twice a year, and I cook for them. typically barbecue. But it's something that I learned when I was a graduate student, because I thought that created community, and it did, and something that I continue to try to do with students. Life continued. Julie and I got married and decided, in fact, our first conversation was, what do we do to get to the West Coast? Because I'm really tired of this weather. She's from Illinois, by the way, so go figure. And our goal was to come to California. So I started applying right and left to every program in California. And finding a faculty position has always been hard. And I sure got my share of rejections, but I really wanted to come to California. University of Arizona had a group that had migrated there from MIT, so we knew many of them. And we thought this was, yeah, it's close enough, it's close to the West Coast. And so I applied, and they offered me the job. Great luck that I have. This was the period when the governor of Arizona got impeached. Do you remember? He refused to declare Martin Luther King a national holiday, and there was an impeachment. All the legislative processes were frozen, so they couldn't give me a written offer letter. They wanted me to show up, and I had some of my faculty back at MIT say, don't do it. If it's not in writing, you don't go. In the middle of that, my only brother, I haven't spoken about my brother, he used to beat me up when I was young. He's 4 years older than me. He could beat me up and nobody else could, which was good. We're very close today. He's in Florida, I'm in California, but I talk to him several times a week. And I want to digress for a minute because growing up, I often laugh. My brother got into all sorts of problems when he was growing up. He was your typical problem teenager, right? In fact, I used to joke that they left me alone, not that I was any better, it's just that they were paying attention to him, not to me. I got in trouble, I just didn't get caught. And eventually something switched in him, and he became an academic. He almost finished a Ph.D. in biomedical engineering and then became an orthopedic surgeon, which is what he does today. But he always used to beat me up. And today we're very close. So my brother, who's doing his residency in orthopedic surgery at San Diego, at UC San Diego, sends me an ad and says, you know, there's opening at UC Irvine. And typical East Coast snob, I said, UC where? You gotta be kidding me. Who's ever heard of that place? No, seriously, it's a very nice place. If you get invited, you can come visit me. I said, oh, that sounds good. So I applied, and I came in January. I want you to think of that, January. Cambridge, Massachusetts versus La Jolla Cove, San Diego. Something just didn't seem fair. I went through the interview at Irvine. I was interested, but not really interested. But I fell in love with the place when I came. In fact, one of my colleagues at the time, Jim Bobrow, you had been here, what, a year? Yeah. A year, right? But I didn't think I had the job because they kept saying, well, we're looking at somebody in this area, but if we find somebody in your area, well, what am I going to say? They're just being polite, right? Well, they offered me the job, and I came out, and that was 1987. Absolutely fabulous experience. We were here for 15 years. Our two kids were born in Orange, Alejandro and Laura. And Julie ended up joining UC Irvine a few years later. She didn't start originally at UCI. And it was a great, absolutely great experience. And the reason it was great at the time remains what I see still today as the reason why I'm so excited to be back. There was a sense of, it's a young school, we can sort of define ourselves in ways that we decide are the right ways to define ourselves in. We don't have to be attached to 150 years of history that dictate the way we do things. And that was true at the time. And so when opportunities came, as they do for many people, to leave an institution, I said, why? I got great colleagues. They let me do my work. I got great students. And it's a great place to live. So I never left. A few years later, the Dean of Engineering, Nick Alexopoulos, asked me to become chair. People often ask me, did you know you wanted to do administration? Absolutely not. I had no clue that I wanted to be an administrator. Took the job at a time where the department was growing. It was an exciting time. And we ran along for a number of years. And the first time that Davis approached me to see if I would consider being dean, I actually said no. I said, I was very flattered because I never thought I'd want to be a dean or could be a dean for that matter. And I thought about it. I said, maybe I should have considered it more, but it's the right decision. Well, they came back again the second year. The search failed. And at the time, the circumstances had changed. We thought it could be a good opportunity. We had 2 little kids. Davis is a college town, very small, very easy to grow up a family in, and that was an attractor. So we went up and spent 11 years at UC Davis as dean. But I tell you that because in the middle of us, actually there for 13 years, about 7, 8 years into my tenure, the provost who hired me, Virginia Henshaw, left. And the chancellor asked me to become provost and EVC while they did a search. And I said no. I said, I'm enjoying what I'm doing in my unit. I've got 2 teenagers at home. And really, I'm flattered you've got other deans who will do a better job than I can do. And they did a search. Eventually, I'll never forget, I went into the chancellor's office, Larry Vanderhoof, who's passed away now, and he said, so you know why you're here? I said, yeah, I'm going to tell you what I think of the candidates we interviewed. I said, no, that's not why you're here. I said, why am I here, Larry? He says, I really want you to do this job. And I was very flattered, and it was very unexpected because Larry was not the sort of person who would pat you on the back. I mean, you did your job, and at the end of the year, you'd hear from him whether you were doing a good job or not, but it was never very effusive. And I truly felt there were better people to do the job, but I was also very, very flattered and decided, okay, they've asked me twice now, I better do this. And I did. It was the worst possible time. This is 08-09. So what did I do during 08-09? Cut, cut, cut. I'll tell you one of the anecdotes that I always like to share about that time. One of the items that had been cut from the budget by the prior provost was free parking for alumni. And I looked at that, and it wasn't a significant dollar amount. And I said, for all the time that these folks give back to the university, really, we're going to cut their parking? So I reinstated that. And I can't tell you, walking around the little town of Davis, random people will come to me and say, thank you for reinstating the parking. Okay, I'll be known for reinstating parking. Very difficult time. I learned a lot. We did a search. I had a letter that I had insisted on that I could go back to being dean at any time. And so I exercised that right. We hired a great provost at Davis and went through my second 5-year rotation, and I was ready to go on sabbatical when the opportunity at Irvine came up. And that was an easy one because, as I said to Julie, it's just one of those places where I would absolutely go back to if they gave me the chance. And I remember it was my daughter who said to me, now wait a second, you were going to go on sabbatical for a year, and instead you're going to do that job that was so hard the last time you did it? Now, you're not very smart, are you? But it was a very easy decision. We came back. My first interview with Howard Gilman. By then, having had the experience of doing the job for 2 years, had taught me that the chemistry between the chancellor and the provost is really important. And just very happy to say that not only was I right, I now have a year behind me to confirm that it's been a real pleasure to work with him. And so it was an easy decision for us to make, to come back down. a bit disruptive. When we left in 2002, a number of staff left with me, my assistant, technician, postdocs. Well, many of them are back now with me, which is incredibly heartwarming for me, but also makes me very nervous. As Julie said to me one morning, says, "Do you have any idea how many lives you're like changing here?" But I'm happy to say that they all seem to be well adjusted now that they're back. So hopefully I've given you a little bit of a glance of my journey. You know, in essence, I've been always, people are a really important part of my job. I strongly believe that you surround yourself with the best people you can, preferably smarter than you are, that you give them the latitude to make important decisions and you back them up when things go wrong. And what I have found so far in a year of doing this is that we are just very blessed with incredible staff and amazing faculty. And I know that sounds easy to say that, but I truly mean it. This morning I had breakfast with 24 assistant professors. I made it a goal this year to have breakfast with every assistant professor on campus. It's going to be bad for my diet, let me tell you. But it was a very good experience, A, to meet many of these folks personally, B, to hear what's on their mind, what's bothering you, what's not working, what's working. Because, you know, sort of going back to the topic of the symposium, and I was thinking, you know, how do I put this? But I think in essence, what matters to me is doing things that matter. And so what can I do to make a difference in the environment that I'm in the institution that I'm in, and the research that I'm in? And it's never a job you do by yourself. Been incredibly blessed with having really bright graduate students, postdocs, visiting professors, colleagues who've really helped me and have taught me a lot. I think that if you look at the folks around you and you empower them and you expect them to do well, they will. If, on the other hand, you don't expect them to do well and you put them in situations where they cannot perform, then they will. And so I just hope that to be able to continue this track, I like to describe my time. I spend probably 90 to 95% of my time on what I call good problems. Deans want more money, there's more space needed, we need more faculty, we need more staff. Those are good problems, they're growing problems. As opposed to the other part of the job that involves discipline and whatnot. So with that balance of time, for me, I just can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing. So I guess I'll leave some time for questions. Thank you so much.
So you mentioned that when you came to UCI 30 years ago, you weren't tied down by history and you could do things the way you wanted. Do you think that's still true at UCI now?
You know, it's all relative. So I think it's still true to some degree. I think that clearly the campus has matured at some level and there's practices. But academia, higher education today is changing rapidly. And we have to adapt. And I think we are adapting here, and I think that our potential to adapt more effectively is much higher here than it was, say, at Davis, where you had about 100 years of history behind the campus. It's not easy. Change is difficult. Change is especially difficult in academia. Mm-hmm. But I think we're in a good period of financial stability and growth, and that's the right time to make change.
What kinds of adaptations do you mean that you're making?
So I'll tell you, one of the things that I've observed at the campus level is that there's a culture of, the campus is fairly risk averse. Okay, I see that at many different levels. And you know, you need to take measured risk. You need to make decisions that might have negative consequences, and then you learn from them. But if you don't take them, the loss of opportunity is too high. And I think it's normal that we all regress to the mean when it comes to our instinct for not taking any risk. But to take risks, first you need to set the tone at all levels, especially at the management level. And then second, you need to empower the rest of the organization to feel comfortable that A, they can tell you when they think you're wrong, which I think is really important in any organization, is to have a culture where people are able to say, at the end of the day, one person makes a decision and things move along, but you need to be able to hear different views of a decision. And second, empowering people to make the decision, knowing that if things go wrong, you're not going to go back and say you're fired, right? Because if they make that decision based on fear, they're not going to make the right decision.
Can you share with us, after your first year, what is one thing that you're particularly proud of after your first year, and what was one of your biggest challenges you faced in your first year?
Just one?
You can share more if you want.
Okay, so let me start with the challenges, because I think I'm really proud of the fact that there was quite a bit of uncertainty, partly because of all the changes in the provost office, the new chancellor, new provost. I had a number of folks tell me, well, you know, I've been working with 5 different provosts, right? So the stability that we have now on campus is something that's tremendously helpful for us to move forward. I'm really proud, one thing that I'm really proud of is, you know, the leadership is key. We hired 4 deans last year, and all 4 were our top choice. We did not settle for second or for third, they were our top choice. We hired a vice chancellor for research, who was our top choice. So to me, that's great, because that means they saw in this place what I see in this place, what you all bring to this place. I think the challenge is, the most difficult thing has been to try to change the mindset of the campus. We really are at the beginning of a great growth curve of opportunity. It's a new era. Rather than, we've had so many problems, enrollments decreased, our faculty went down, we don't have enough staff, all true. But trying to change the mindset to look forward at the opportunities we have now, because there are more resources. They're not infinite resources, but there are resources. And think that way has been hard. It's a cultural issue, right? It's easier. And one of my pet peeves is Pramod, our new vice chancellor for research, is working very hard at trying to increase the efficiency of that office, decrease the barriers that faculty and staff have to doing their business. I mean, doing research today is a lot more difficult than it was when I started 30 years ago, right? 30 years ago, you could get a grant from an agency, you take the grant, and as long as you didn't buy yourself a car, you were fine. You could move monies from one category to another. Today, you gotta fill 30 forms. Compliance, trust me, I don't sit in my office trying to come up with what other compliance rules that we're gonna submit to ourselves today. There's a whole host of federal and state laws that force us to adhere to compliance measures that we have coming at us from many different directions. So how do we make life easier for the faculty and staff? How do we get rid of roadblocks or unnecessary practices that have existed, because that's the way we've always done it? So that's been a pet peeve, and Pramod is being a really good partner at trying to work with the academic units, with the business units, and learn what can we change to make things easier.
Provost Lavernia, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Earlier you talked about living in Puerto Rico and how it impacted your life because of the diversity that you had there all the time. I was wondering how that impacted or influenced any initiatives you may have taken or decision making in your chair as a dean, as a provost.
So, you know, very much so. I mean, I think, and this has been one of the great things about UCI, right? The whole concept of inclusive excellence, which is ours, that concept was invented here, not by me, wasn't come up with either by Gilman or Doug maybe. But it really crystallizes the idea that we're all moving in the same direction. We all want to be excellent, whether it's research, whether it's teaching, whether it's service, whether it's business. But that excellence, by definition, needs to be inclusive, right? You need to include, you need to have everybody working towards the same goal. And what a better way to get to a goal than to get diverse opinions, whether it's racial, whether it's sexual, whatever it is, you need to consider all the points of view. I've benefited from that in my life, listening to the way people look at different problems. And I think that we've got work to do. You look at the metrics, we're headed in some of the right directions with, Doug now has, his office is right next to mine. He knows that he has complete access to my time. But also coming up with programs, whether it's new faculty FTEs that can be aimed at enriching the diversity of certain programs in certain areas, whether it's women or it's faculty of color or whatever the metric may be, being able to more aggressively recruit the best folks so that we continue to move towards this concept of inclusive excellence. So we've deployed some programs and we're always looking to see how we can do better. And it's a learning process. I mean, one of the things that I've pledged with all of these new hiring programs to the units is that I'll look at the data, and if they're not working, we'll change them. It's very important to know what's effective and what's not, because it's difficult.
Since the microphone is here, you're an engineer, and I'm wondering at what point in life you realized you're an engineer and how that informs your worldview. Did you tear your dad's watch apart? Did you, undo the family VCR? And what does engineering mean to you at a personal level, and how does that inform?
I don't know if any of you remember the late Dave Bruce from history. It's a wonderful colleague. Well, Dave, Bruce, Cindy Sasso, Herb Kalaki, and I used to jog at lunchtime for many years when I was here. And it was Dave Bruce who used to tell me, well, you're an engineer, you can fix anything with duct tape and a pair of pliers, right? Something like that. I guess fundamentally from a young age, I like to take things apart. Funny enough, I've got a son and a daughter. He's just graduated in engineering from Purdue and is staying on from graduate school, and I saw that in him. As a little kid, he just liked to take things apart, see how things work, reprogram all the thermostats in the house. It's a real problem. And my daughter, who's actually at UC Davis, Laura's always wanted to be a vet. She graduated when we were at Davis. Well, don't you think that it would have really made sense for her to stay at Davis? But of course not. So she ended up doing 2 years at UC San Diego, did well academically, but did not like it. So she announced she was moving to Davis the same moment that we announced we're coming down here. So you know what her response was? She said, Papa, does that mean I can live in our house in Davis? I don't think so, honey. So I used to joke that the reason I really had to leave Davis is because Laura was moving to Davis. Anyway, I bring them up because I see in them some of the things that I think I saw as a kid. Laura is sort of the opposite. She is always liked animals, science, the living part of it as opposed to the engineering part of it. One of the great things that happened to engineering was that it's really now, it's converging in a very rapid way with health. And that's good for many reasons. I mean, I remember seeing my primary care physician and having him or her switch 2 or 3 medications at the same time. Pretty basic that you don't change 3 variables and then try to figure out what happened at the end, right? That's really changing in medicine, right? And actually in many fields, quantitative biology, many fields have adopted mathematics and quantification and statistics in a more aggressive way. And the merger of engineering and medicine, I think, bodes really well for us as a society, for this country, and just for the health of the nation. But for me, it was really tinkering at a very early age that did it.
In 2008, 2009, when you had to make cuts across campus in Davis, the one thing to survive was alumni parking. You also mentioned that now we're in a new era in the university's life cycle. How do you see the importance of community building in that next phase for UCI?
You know, thank you for that. So one of the observations I had when I was here in my first 15 years was that UCI spent its first 50 years really looking introspectively, hiring great faculty, hiring great staff, but not really engaging too much with the community. It was almost a pride that we were this ivory tower here in Irvine, that nobody in the community knew what was going on here, right? So fast forward to today, and one of the first conversations I had with Gilman was his view of engaging the community. Fast forward to today, and I can tell you that it's playing a vital role in where we are and where we're headed. We're the only R1 university in a county of 6 million people, 3 million people, which is the sixth largest county in the country. If we don't leverage the community, we're missing a huge opportunity, and they are part of our success. Whether it's via the health sciences, art, business, entrepreneurship, technology, the humanities, it's all there. The good news is that as I've gone out and met with folks around the community, there's an incredible amount of energy right now around this new vision that Gilman has for this campus that people are really buying into. And quite frankly, as you've heard, and I guarantee you will be hearing more, and they are investing in. Because one of the things that has changed is less than 10% of our budget, we're at about $2.6 billion operating budget, comes from the state. Let me say that again, less than 10%. So the defunding of higher ed in the state of California, and we can go into many reasons why, has been occurring over several decades. But what does that mean? We just stand still and say, oh, well, that's terrible, we just can't survive. We've done exactly the opposite. What do we need to do? How do we need to engage the community to help us build what we need to build? And how do we take our future in our own hands? And I think that the community is vital, whether it's advisory boards for the departments, for the schools, for the campus, whether it's the foundation board, it's all right now really being energized and activated. And you know, alumni giving, we never paid attention to alumni. For the first time, we're looking seriously at engaging and connecting alumni. The alumni are very dedicated. Once you reach out to them, they respond quickly. But if you don't reach out to them, they can't respond.
One more question for you. You mentioned you had your team that went up with you to do this and then came back with you as well. And you have a very, responsible position here. So how do you maintain research in your academic life?
With great difficulty. So, I mean, I try to carve out a few hours of the week. I wasn't an early riser, so I tend to be on email by 5 a.m. And I mean, quite frankly, there's no magic. I've got some fantastic postdocs who are helping me. I mean, it's a reduced group. But I think it's important, and I think it's important, fundamentally I enjoy it. I took this job because I like students and research. But I think it helps me be a better administrator because it lets me see what's not working. And at a very basic level as a faculty member, whether it's submitting a proposal, whether it's not having enough staff in an area, and then I can work on things that matter, right? And that's important to me, to be able to make changes that will make things better. We're expecting more and more of our faculty. Compliance, more students. So we've got to do everything we can to make it easier for them and the wonderful staff that make it all possible, rather than making it more difficult. And so it grounds me. I was walking on campus the first week, and I don't know if any of you know Ernie at the Key Shop. Okay, well, I've known Ernie for years. And I'm walking on campus, and I run into Ernie, and Ernie gives me a hug, and he says, "Where have you been?" Says, Ernie, I've been gone for 13 years, but again, sort of the connection you make with staff, but at the same time, the importance of keeping everybody working towards making things better, not, one of my pet peeves is, no, you can't do that. Why not? Can we find a way to do it? There's laws, there's things we can't do, but can we figure ways to do things to make things easier, run smoother? And I've just been so impressed with the dedication of the community as a whole. I ended up, Thomas Parnham, our wonderful Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, convinced me to go help move in freshmen. And I said, why not? That sounds like fun. And I gotta tell you, it was great not only to see the facilities and see the students, but the parents. Oh my God, I've forgotten. I mean, I took my kids to school. I remember that day how hard it was. And it was them who were, crying and very emotional. It was the kids who were really like, okay, I'm done, you can leave now. So, I mean, it was a great experience. And this is something his office does every year. So I'm certainly will be happy to join again if I can. But the quality, the stories of the students who are coming here, it's a place that I think it's truly poised to, it's already special, but to do something really remarkable if we continue the trajectory we're on. We got challenges, but.
Thank you for coming. We've talked about community, or you've talked about community a lot, and the question is, how do you see the collaboration between academia and staff in terms of growth and professional development for staff? There are a lot of staff that have been in departments and that have come in, and part of what the sustaining of an organization is built on, the buy-in of the staff and being able to retain and recruit good people, not just from the academy. But what role do you see the academy in supporting, providing opportunities for professional growth and development for staff?
Thank you for that question. An absolutely important one. So as you know, one of the things that we've done in the past year is reorganized HR under a new Vice Chancellor for HR. And we've just started down that pathway, trying to accelerate it. But one of the key elements is how can we institute programs to help staff develop skills that will help them move from one position to another. I mean, in essence, we want the community of staff, and many of whom are already doing this, who've been here for many years, to benefit from that loyalty, right? So that they can get additional skill sets that will let them advance, let them become a more vital part of the mission of the decisions that we make. So we're looking at a number of different training programs. Having Ramona in charge of a single organization that looks at both the health system and the main campus is something that's going to help. So stay tuned.
I know that we're not anticipating any separation soon, but looking long term, when you leave this position, what would you like, what lasting imprint would you like to leave on the campus?
Oh, goodness. That's a hard one. That's like writing your obituary, right? I hadn't thought of that. So I would like for me to have contributed to UCI defining to be the campus that it wants to be. I don't know what the definition is yet, but I know that, and this has come up, what is UCI known for? That's a problem. Actually, I think it's an opportunity. Because, let me use a counterexample. And I had 13 wonderful years at Davis. You could not get out of the stamp of being an ag school. It's in the DNA of the place, which was terrific. It's a #1 ag school in the country. We leveraged it from engineering, has the best wine school in the country. But my point is that was so seared into the DNA of the institution that you could not change it. We can define who we want to be here. Whatever that may be, it's got to be excellent. And I'd love to be able to be part of whatever that personality UCI becomes.
Well, it's been a terrific first presentation of what matters to me. Let's give a hand to Provost.